and it may still be, but there's no active developmental proposal at this point, but it may very well be under contract by someone else.
Thank you. Commissioners? Kenny, you had some questions.
I just have some simple. So I heard a few people talk about the fire department, about the school system, about the police department. Have you had any contact with any of the school superintendent maybe, or the fire chief or the police chief at all?
We haven't gone down those roads yet because generally speaking, those would typically happen at a site plan application process. Again, that's when we're looking at specific development plans and programs. So, so each, fire department, police department, they would look at an individual project site basis to determine the impacts, and the same with the superintendent. I will say that some of the research we did has been showing a declining student population in the town of Watertown. So I know there was some comments about adding and the need for additional classrooms and teachers and things like that. I think that could come, and a study related to that could certainly be a requirement that would come along with the future site plan application, say for the multifamily component of this project. And perhaps that's actually a great thing that the commission may want to consider adding to the standards that we've proposed, is to require an economic impact assessment to come along with each future application, which would require a more comprehensive and detailed analysis related with that particular project's potential impacts to schools, school-age children, generation, impacts to state facilities, things like that. I think that would certainly be something that could be added to the language that's currently before you to further ensure that those things can be adequately looked at during that site plan application process.
Sure. So I don't know that I would be as concerned with the school as I would be with the fire and emergency, because if you're familiar with what, there was a building put up on Straits Turnpike, which I don't think anybody opposed, called the Ivy. It's an elderly care facility to the south of Laban's Market. Are you familiar with that, Kevin?
Yes.
Are you familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that building, there was, again, I don't think there's anybody opposed to it, and everybody thought it was a great idea. However, I don't have the actual numbers, but I do know that it's wreaked havoc on the 911 and the fire department. They're there several times a day, and I think the response time for a normal resident who's in an emergency has more than doubled. Mm-hmm. So let's say it was 7 minutes average, now it's 14. So I think it's a good idea to reach out to the people in charge of those three departments.
Yeah, I have, obviously I wasn't involved in that particular project. I have some experience with some other elderly care facilities, and sure, they certainly do create additional demands on emergency services just because of the age of the population and the need for 911 calls with falls or other medical events. But I certainly think that we could, from an industrial standpoint or for a non-age restricted multifamily development, I think those don't necessarily have those same constraints or requirements, but we can certainly, provide more analysis at that stage, or if the commission wants to see it at this point, at this stage.
Sure. And lastly, the police department part where somebody talked about a haven for car thieves. It is truly. There's a bordering neighborhood which, some of us could probably hit a golf ball from your site to the neighborhood I'm speaking of. And I think there was 6 cars stolen there in the last 6 months. So yeah, that would be a concern also.
Sure. And I'll say, there was a comment about the potential for welfare recipients moving in here, or creating a crime-ridden environment, or if Heritage would retain the multifamily. you know, it's the intent of the applicant to find or to either operate themselves or find a reputable multifamily operator who doesn't want to create that. They want to create a project that is vibrant, that a place where people want to live. You know, there were talks about, you know, young professionals who grew up in Watertown and want to come back, but there's nowhere for them to live. There's no, you know, there's no community where they feel like they can come back and have, you know, have a clubhouse with amenities and things like that. And this is an opportunity to create that in town. And we certainly wouldn't want to create something that could be viewed as a slum or anything like that. We want to create something that's vibrant. And
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, I wouldn't argue that. I don't think you're gonna throw good money at something you think's gonna go bad. I'm not insinuating that, but car theft is huge.
Yeah.
And the other, lastly, is it your thought of doing both the industrial and the housing? Are you thinking that, you talked a little bit, or the person before you talked a little bit about walking to work. Would this be housing for employees of the industrial complexes?
It's not the intent.
No.
And we actually wouldn't, you know, we aren't proposing walking trails from the Bunker Hill side to the industrial side. As I've mentioned, as we've talked about, you know, the site is topographically challenged. There are natural resources and wetlands and things like that. So we weren't proposing or anticipating that this was going to be, I think as someone colorfully referred to it as, a GM plant with row housing. That's not the intent of this development.
Right. So that you referred to your plan as a master plan a few times. So I know there's not a lot of room to change what's going on in the residential side because of the size of the piece of property you're dealing with. However, that's really just a conceptual plan, right?
That's correct.
So once you get a zone change of this magnitude, that could change. I mean, how close, I guess what I'm trying to ask, the difficult part of what I'm trying to ask is, how close to what you're showing us do you think the reality of this project would be?
I think on the multifamily side, that would be very consistent with what we'd be proposing.
Right.
As I mentioned at the last hearing, we talked about some other projects that we've been involved in, and I mentioned a project in East Hartford, Connecticut called Concourse Park. Very similar building types and concepts would be proposed here. From a unit mix standpoint and from an architectural standpoint. So we wouldn't expect a wholesale different approach from a multifamily standpoint. I think that would be consistent in terms of both unit count and potential layout, just because of the narrowness of the lot, the need
Sure.
to protect those resources and develop something that we think we can still make a community feel.
I agree. So the industrial end of it, what am I trying to ask? So is there in your text amendment, is there a building size restriction?
So we do have a building coverage restriction. Now, what we're proposing, and actually, do you have the site plan? So we do have, you know, coverage restrictions, but, you know, each lot that we've laid out is even probably more restrictive than that, just because of, you know, site constraints in order to create level pads and provide, you know, parking and things like that. So we don't have a maximum size cap, but from a site constraint standpoint, we think that what we've proposed, which essentially contemplates a 4-lot industrial subdivision to create 4 lots that could be developed, you know, individually. That's why we talked about phasing. You know, I wouldn't expect, you know, a wholesale change in overall square footage, just, you know, because of how the terrain is and how each parcel kind of needs to be at its own elevation to really fit into that location on the site. Sure. And I know one of the, someone mentioned about kind of like nestling things into the woods. We've kind of done that, but we've done that on a scale of what the current market demands are for building size and tenant requirements.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? I know, Danny, you have some questions.
Couple. First, to the residents, I wanted to thank you all for coming out. I know this is a lot of time, but we do hear you. We are listening, and you are appreciated. To the applicants, your presentation has been excellent. We appreciate all the work that's gone into it. In your presentation, we talked about there's about 1,500 jobs. Do you have any idea what the average income for those jobs are?
I don't have that, but I think that could certainly be something, and again, it's kind of something else we've mentioned. Perhaps we should, commission should consider adding the need for an economic impact assessment to be included with site plan applications, because that can actually include that exact information. We would anticipate this many jobs and, an average income of X.
Yep. Yeah, if we could do that, that would be great. Can we get a copy of what was presented to economic development?
Well, the application or the presentation this evening was submitted to staff, so the commission does have, the staff has a copy of that.
Thank you.
As the staff, as those commission members.
I know we already spoke about the fire department, but we are a voluntary fire department, and we are pretty much maxed out. So when we speak of large buildings, tall buildings, I do feel that that is going to create a big problem for our fire department. I was happy to see the 500-foot buffer. I thought that was a big step. What year was it zoned industrial? I know you said it was previously industrial. Do you know what year that was?
I don't, but my understanding was when Heritage Woods was approved, that's when the zone was changed to allow for that residential use. That's my understanding.
Mark, are you aware of?
Kenny says it was 2007.
It was around 2007, when Paparazzo came to us with the elder, the 55 and older.
Right.
That sounds about right. The permits had recently, last year expired, but I believe they were granted around 2005 or so. And my understanding was that the property was zoned industrial prior to that. So that's consistent.
Okay, thank you. One thing I did want to mention, because there was a lot of talk about conservation of land, this is developable land. So the person that owns that land has the right to develop it, much like all of our homes at one point were on, raw land where animals lived, and it was developed for our homes or our businesses or so on and so forth. So as sad as it is to see trees get torn down, it is the right of the property owner to develop it. I'm not saying in this manner, but just generally speaking, if it's developable land, they do have that right, and they should have that right. And I think that's all I have.
Kenny?
Yep, I'm back. So earlier in the presentation, the gentleman behind you, I can't remember his name, Kevin, he talked about rents $1,100 for a one-bedroom and $1,500 for a two-bedroom. Can you share with us how you came up with those numbers, maybe where you got the comparable figures for that, if it's local or national or whatever?
Yes, Brian Atherton, WPH Holdings. As I mentioned, and I do have an answer to the earlier question regarding jobs and wages. But remember when I mentioned the pro forma or projection of revenue and expenses, and I wanted to be clear. We use federal numbers for the cost of school-age children. We did not have a specific cost that is cited in each of the various sources, as there are special needs, there's fixed costs, there's incremental costs, there's all kinds of debate going on with regards to public school children. And the rents, once again, were a projection of, remember, we can't move, or we can't predict the market. We are in a very limited supply, high demand marketplace, which has driven prices, which may not be there for very long, based on what's happening in the credit default market and the swaps, and which are the collateralized debt behind a lot of what is out there. 8% interest rates has really taken a toll. So I didn't want to use a number that was, because we asked, what is a rental, what's a rental? Those are placeholders to show the mechanics of a formula of supply or of revenue minus expenses. So I can't predict what will happen a couple years from now if this development were to move forward, because I can't predict the future. So those are not what would be, we would forecast. Those were used as placeholders, and where'd I get them? From comps. So basically from, if you look at the comps and the rental comps, but once again, the comparables in the market are not indicative of a nice quality new product.
Right.
So those
And-
comps, I didn't want to use data that's going higher than the comps, because the commission would then say, well, you made up these numbers. Well, I didn't make up the numbers. The numbers are true.
Well, I asked the question, and I don't think you're that far off. However, that was the reason why I asked the question, because that's kind of what I expected you to give me for an answer. So I'm a believer in what comes up must come down. And the only reason those numbers are anywhere near the figures that you were throwing at us here, 1,100 and 1,500, those numbers 3 or 4 years ago were going to almost cut in half. So what if they get cut in half again? Then who are you going to fill those 156 apartments with?
And they very may well get cut to some point. Our studies show that with the construction costs where they are, with the lack of skilled labor, we're not going to have too much supply. With the interest rates where they are, we're not going to have an oversupply in the market. That's a good thing. So that being said, we are going to face some challenges, and that's why we didn't want to use an artificially inflated number.
And I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I didn't ask this question.
Yeah.
When you came for preliminary discussion, I don't know how many months back it was, I know I had asked the question about the 55 and older adult community thing. Did you look into that at all?
We did, and I just wanted to point out one more thing about the rents. One of the things that we proposed with the multifamily is a multi-building plan and program, because that would allow us to build one building with 24 or 36 units, let those lease up, and then once we hit that certain demand, we can go to the next structure. That's a way to protect against falling rents or being adaptive and responsive to what the market demands are. So that's why we have a multi-building program, to allow for that to happen, to protect against what if all of a sudden we build all these units and the rents drop in half. To answer the question about the 55 and older, from a marketing standpoint, the availability of the 55 and older housing exists, and the market needs
Exists in Watertown?
well, it exists in the broader regional market.
Okay.
What the demand is now is for housing units and multifamily units that don't have that restriction, because again, as I mentioned before, and you know, we're trying to create an opportunity for people who live and work in this community but can't afford the housing stock that's here, and they need a place to reside, they need a place to live. The young professionals coming back from college who don't want to leave Watertown, they can't necessarily afford to rent a single-family home, or they're not available, and they certainly can't afford to buy something in today's market. You know, we see this all the time with the suddenly single population, where a family goes through a divorce, and one part of that family wants to stay in town, wants to stay in the school system, but needs to have a place where they can live that's in that same district, and they can, you know, bring, you know, either stay in that area or have a child stay with them part-time. So it's, again, it's not even necessarily a new school-age child in the system. It's just another place for them to live. So so having that flexibility, that's the new product that's being constructed in today's market. Right. Which is why we're still before you with the regular, you know, market rate program.
Sure. Do these buildings have elevators in them?
What we're proposing is like current plan is a 3-story product, so it would actually be like a walk-up product. Okay. But again, from a market standpoint and with the multi-building layout, if there was a need or demand for an elevator building, we could certainly, do that based on what the market looks like.
Because if they had elevators, they could become 55 and older, right?
Right, these currently aren't elevator buildings.
Right.
These would be three-story walk-up buildings.
But it wouldn't be that difficult to make them accessible to the 55 and older crowd.
What happens in a product like this is the first floor tends to be generally occupied by those who may not want to deal with stairs. What happens is there's trade-offs. When you introduce elevators, you introduce a whole nother layer of costing components. Scheduling, I mean, waiting for product today. I mean, just transfer switch for electrical, we're waiting a year on various projects. So we wanted to create a design that was very community-based with separate, smaller buildings rather than one big structure. That's what usually happens in multifamily development, is there's a big box because that elevator, that cost of the elevator is contributed to each of those units, that per unit cost. So if we introduce elevators, there may need to be some consolidation of the boxes to be larger to be feasible for the introduction of that elevator.
And generally speaking, structures that would be, a four-story building is what generally implements the installation of an elevator.
Right. But they can't be put in a three-story building.
They can, but what I've seen is the cost associated with that essentially costs that product out of the market.
Right.
And it isn't really being constructed today based on construction costs.
Thank you.
Are there any other commissioners that have any questions?
I
Any
have,
other commissioners?
Ray, I have a
Yes, go
follow-up
ahead, Louis.
question. Just so I understood you correctly before when you were speaking, did I hear you say that you were gonna find a developer to build those apartments, or is that something you guys are building?
To manage the apartments.
So like a management company, but you guys will be doing the construction of the apartments and you own those apartments? You're not
Correct.
selling that off to another developer, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And the operation, correct.
All right, I thought I heard you say you would find a developer for it, so,
Oh, no.
I-
Sorry about that if I misspoke.
okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other commissioners have any questions? I have a couple questions. Do you have any marketing data supporting your statement that there's no market for 55 and older communities? We know from personal anecdotal in Watertown situations that we have one developer who put up 40 units, and is it 40 units? Is about to do 40? I think it is 40. 30? Yeah, go ahead, jump in on that one. How many?
So the applicant that was here before you tonight, that I recused myself from his application, he's here to get his own change to build 55 and older condominiums, standalone condominiums. And he's going to build 32 of them. And he's already gotten 40 phone calls on him, and he hasn't. There's no road, there's no infrastructure, there's nothing. There's a huge demand for 55 and older. Huge in this zip code that we're discussing tonight.
Yeah, and I live in the 55 and older community, and you can't list the property there. I mean, there's a demand, there's a list of people that, we get solicitations from real estate agents to let us know if anybody is interested in selling their units. Plus, there was an older population. Brian mentioned that we're getting older and staying later, okay? So there's also a flow of retired people that like to go to, they call them snowbirds, to go to Florida and then come back. And it's hard to maintain a larger home here in town. And they would probably be interested in a smaller 55 and older community that was more affordable. And they'd be able to have a place here to come and see their friends and their family during the so that's why I asked if there was any marketing data that you had to support that statement that you had given us, Brian, prior to our public hearings, when you came here preliminarily, saying that your research indicated that there was no market for this. Also, just anecdotally, my car was stolen from my garage, all right? Yeah, and so it's crazy, all right, the car thieves. And so I know from personal experience, that is a valid point. And garages, you know, garages are, I mean, it's really nuts, okay? I don't know what's going on with the way things are going now, and crime and craziness, but that is another factor. That is a factor with this many vehicles ungaraged in one area, okay? And that does present an issue. And it's very close, you're very close to the Waterbury corridors, where the roads are easy to get to Waterbury, okay? And to get on to 84, okay, and to get on Route 8 and to get to Waterbury very quickly, and especially those neighborhoods where the problems exist, okay? So I'd like to ask you that question about marketing and the data.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize if I misspoke or maybe I wasn't as clear when I said no market. There's no feasibility from our study for what happens when you do a feasibility study for a development. And I do, full disclosure, I do know Mr. Lovely and Tony from earlier. When I was early in my career 25 years ago, Mr. Lovely actually spent some time with me and taught me a thing or two, so I really respect their development and their development style and their quality. What happens is people don't realize there's a lot of Mr. Lovelies out there that are very successful that have 20 units, 40 units, 60 units. It's called a pipeline. So a pipeline that many people don't know, or many, you know, not every town information pretty much stays within town, word of mouth. It doesn't generally leave the town, but in every town, there's products, and there's competing products that are not in front of a planning and zoning commission, not in front of wetlands, that are being discussed informally. That's our job as analysts, to really understand what's called the pipeline. So, for instance, there's about 900 units of 55-plus communities that tend to be really pricey because they're developers coming from New York that really understand that there's very wealth in our, I'm 54. You know, after so many years, you tend to generate some wealth and you want to stay in the area. So these developers have realized that the quality is going to capture that retention of that resident. So in our studies, with the supply of pipeline, that's what makes the underwriters, the banks, it's really the banks, very scared and saying that I don't think there's feasibility in that type of development because of the lack of, I mean, the demand's there, but the supply is popping up all over the place, and you don't want to be the one that has a last building built where there's no one to occupy your building. So I would say to you that the multifamily development is definitely feasible. I mean, we talked about POCD, I mean, and understand that Watertown is unique, does have a larger elderly population, generally about 4.5 years.
So Brian, is there any data that you have?
Yeah, so data, once again, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, data is sometimes in closed rooms with staff and with informal meetings that we're privy to that we couldn't share in public forums. But yes, we have, over the last year, we have been calculating, we've been working on this a year already before we've come in front of you. And that data has been seriously considered, and we wanted to do a 55-plus community. At first, that we thought we had a great idea because everyone else is doing apartments. But then after we dove in and saw the oversupply of product, potentially, if it all gets approved, it all comes together, we can't be the last one standing, or we can't get financing.
Okay, you can't share that with us because it's...
So I'll give you an example. You have in Newtown, Connecticut, 180 units on a controversial 100 acres on the corner of Old Hollyville and Mount Pleasant Road that AMS Acquisitions is now going for 200. It was a 400,000 square foot, supposed to be distribution center. It was a change of zone from partial residential to industrial Wharton Development, got denied for the 400,000 square feet. They could have appealed. It was actually, it was in their interest. They would have won, but they didn't want to spend time in a community where they weren't welcome. That project now, so that it's not public record, just to give you an example, that's approximately 200 units right there. A little higher end, a little more amenities, on a larger 100-acre parcel, but 100% adult community.
I'll just offer anecdotally. So we have, I probably have about, just about 900 units of multifamily development that we have designed, entitled, and are going to construction in Monroe, New Britain, and East Hartford over 5 projects, and those are all not age restricted. So.
Okay. You have 12 units per acre. That's a fairly significant density for the multis. Is that, did you determine that's necessary for what, for economic reasons, for development reasons, or?
Well, what we're proposing, so we had to establish a zoning standard.
Yes,
So
sir.
we wanted to look at, kind of comparable densities for, similar communities, which was where we came up with the 12 units per acre. I'll say our proposed plan is actually 9.23 units per acre, so actually just under 10 units per acre.
Okay.
And that's, and based on my experience, from what we believe the market demand was, what we proposed, we think best fits on the site and the site's constraints. If the commission felt strongly about restricting those to be age restricted, I would likely assume that it would be fewer buildings, and they'd likely need it to be 4 stories to accommodate that elevator. So the density may be comparable, but the plan would likely look different from a layout standpoint. But I think that if 12 units per acre is something that the commission thinks is too broad, 10 units per acre is certainly something that would still fit within what we believe the program should be.
Okay.
So that can certainly be something the commission can modify down from 12 to 10.
Okay. ASTA comes in after this plan is, if this plan is approved, that comes in as a site plan situation?
That's correct. That's how the regs currently are drafted.
Okay. And I had asked once before whether the developer out here would consider, you've coupled the residential and the industrial, if you considered bifurcating those?
Well, when we initially met with staff, we're looking at an assemblage we're looking at an assemblage that's kind of being marketed in one large lump, right? So for either this developer or even the sellers to have something that is marketable, we were trying to create something that would utilize the entirety of the land, but it gave flexibility for the myriad of uses that need to be accommodated on the land. So if we were to propose a PDD just for the industrial component and a PDD for the multifamily component, that couldn't proceed from a transaction standpoint because the seller isn't interested in only selling one piece or the other. They're marketing the entire assemblage as one package. So for us to try to bifurcate the permitting, it doesn't fit within their contractual time frames of a purchase and sale agreement and things like that. We had to be able to establish a zoning mechanism that dealt with the entirety of the assemblage in order to facilitate a deal to take place here.
Okay. And then the public had brought several things, special needs. I do know that we had apparently 4 special needs students recently came into Watertown. Watertown has a very generous special needs program, so it's attractive to people to move to town that have special needs requirements. Okay, this cost the budget of the school board another $760,000 4 people. And you know, when you gave us the federal data on the cost of students, it wasn't Watertown specific, okay? With the percentage of, that data would have to reflect Watertown specific information, because we are uniquely attractive to more expensive student costs, okay? So, you know, that information is a feature of what we have here in town, you know, because it's a very localized situation. That's just a comment I'd like
Yeah.
to make, you know.
So again, I think to add to that, I think, you know, just in this discussion, there's been you know, we've discussed some things that the commission has clearly indicated a concern about. And what we talked about was requiring I think the commission should consider adding or modifying the language before you, which you are certainly within your rights to do. And I'd defer to staff because I think he would certainly reinforce this. The commission wants to add and make add a condition to our PDD requirements. You could certainly require an economic impact assessment to go along with each site plan application, which actually includes specific Watertown data. It talks specifically about, and we've done this on other applications, what school district are they going to? How is that school district equipped today? What is the student population in that school district? You know, and look at, and it's not just number of school-age kids, but how many in elementary school, how many in middle school, how many in high school. And you can certainly craft some language that can define and establish what those parameters should be at the time of any application that comes before the commission.
Right, currently our budget is like 70% weighted towards the Board of Education. So that's a big factor in our grand list and our taxes in this town, okay? But, you know, yes, Brian.
I think the comment, Mr. Chair, is if the property were to be developed as single-family homes, it would have a 50% greater impact on public school children, on the cost to educate for single-family homes, public school children, in just the Newwood Road side of the development. That's not even looking at Bunker Hill.
Well, you know, if with the current zoning, you could get less single-family homes in there than you can 156 apartments. It's R70, I do believe. That's almost an acre. You've got 196 acres. That'd be about 80 units possibly. And then take off roads, maybe 70 units, 60 units versus 156, you know? I mean, if you really look at the numbers, Brian, I don't think that does add up.
But that could be 150, or that could be 85 bedroom homes with 2 or 3 school children in each home.
Right,
We're talking about
5-bedroom homes.
Huh?
We don't have a whole lot of 5-bedroom homes.
But you could, even 4-bedroom homes.
You know, I agree. I do agree. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't want, you know, I'm just
Yeah.
pointing that out.
We're talking about 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and I think what
Right.
we tried to show from the data.
I understand.
Yeah.
1 and 2 bedroom apartments is a small unit, you know, that's why I was saying, you know, if we had, that could be attractive as an affordable, age-restricted community type of situation, okay? Any other commissioners have anything to say?
Through the chair?
Yes, please.
I have a couple. Any thoughts to operating hours or restriction of operating hours?
So on the industrial side of it?
Yeah,
so
sorry.
I've worked on a number of industrial developments throughout the state and really the region. What I've found is, generally speaking, they prefer not to restrict hours. However, there are a number of things that commissions can consider to kind of protect against some of those, you know, and put in restrictions for hours of operations for specific things, right? So you may want, I've worked in one community where they, you know, a lot of times these warehouses, they'll have trucks on the loading docks and then maybe some trailers that are parked in spaces. And what'll happen is a yard tractor may come and move one from a dock bay to a parking space. What I've seen is put in restrictions on the use of a yard tractor during evening hours. However, oftentimes, if a truck is backed into a facility, they may still want people inside to move product in and out of those trucks, but that necessarily doesn't generate any noise or create any other kind of, adverse impact to the surrounding community. So I think from an operations standpoint, from a potential user standpoint, it is important to have some flexibility there. But I certainly think and believe there are ways that the commission can add some conditions, specific to that, depending on, where the building is in relation to residential areas and things like that.
And if it were approved, what would be phasing of construction versus residential versus industrial?
So I think, generally speaking, if it was and Brian, please chime in if I misspeak, but my experience, I think that the multifamily component on Bunker Hill almost is a standalone. So if that was allowed to be, again, just based on my experience, from a market standpoint, non-age restricted, that could likely potentially proceed immediately. Our next steps would be a subdivision to kind of formally create the parcels. But that could stand on its own. That could go soon. On the industrial side, it would likely be the subdivision process and probably at least one site plan application immediately. So that would allow and facilitate the construction of the road and the start of development of one of the pieces. And then the other parcels either may come in at the same time or independently as potential operators or users or tenants are identified for those buildings.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions? Kenny?
Just one more. No, this is just more of a curiosity thing. Is this piece of property for sale now, or how did you find this piece of property? I'm just curious.
It is available for sale. It's not advertised too much on the marketplace, but it is available for sale.
Okay, yeah.
No further questions? Jack, you're unusually quiet tonight.
I'm listening.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to restate, it's available for sale. We are the contract purchasers. We are in contract and have been and have the right to pursue entitlements.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mark, do we have room for, I think we've pretty much covered the public hearing situation here. I think we might entertain closing the public hearing. Do we have a time limit on closing this public hearing?
If the public hearing remained open, we would ask the applicant for a 35-day extension from tonight. My recommendation would be to keep the public hearing open in order to process the information, in order for staff to generate a report, in order to get additional information from others. Just for instance, we heard talk of contacting other agencies, police chiefs, fire, et cetera, to get some input. We'd be happy to do that. But again, just to be safe, that would be considered, even though it's brought up in the meeting, it'd probably be safe to leave the public hearing open so that if there is any additional information, it could be brought into the record.
Okay, another 3 hours. All right. All right. Would the applicant entertain requesting an extension, agreeing to a 35-day extension of keeping the hearing open and waiting for staff to give us additional data, or are the applicant to give us additional data?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't think you're on. You're not on. There you go.
Sorry, yes, we'd be happy to grant the extension. Again, our goal is to create the best product that we think we can for the property and try to be responsive to the concerns raised. So yes, we'd be happy to grant an extension.
All right, so I guess what we're going to do is we're going to.
Mr. Chairman, and you certainly, considering that, leaving it open, you certainly could, at the next meeting, ensure or try to enforce the fact that no repeat information is brought forth. I mean, folks have had the chance to express their opinions, and you could, falls to you, but to enforce only discussion on new information.
On new items, yes, yes.
To try to
Yeah.
limit discussion.
Yes, yes. We could certainly try to do that. All right. Do we need a motion I'd like to hear a motion to continue the public hearing.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Any second? We need a
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that carries. All right, thank you. By the way, your presentation was very, very, very good.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Just for legality, can you please say the date and where the meeting's going to be?
Okay, so Mark, where's the date and where's the meeting going to be?
Give it here. December 6th.
The next meeting would be first Wednesday of December, which would be.
December 6th,
December
December
6th.
6th.
You're going to run that meeting.
in the town council chambers, 61 Echo Lake Road.
Thank you, everybody.
We gotta make a motion to adjourn.
No, we got more stuff on the agenda, guys.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I thought we were done.
Well, we're close. Just hang on a minute.
Meeting dates.
We got a bunch of stuff here.
Oh, easy on the bunch of stuff.
Where is the, here it is. All right. Let's take a 5-minute recess, guys, and then we'll finish this thing up. You don't want to do that?
No, let's knock it out. Come on.
No, we gotta get out of here. Let's do this, come on.
Oh, 20-minute recess. All right, all right, all right. All right.
We'll be done in a minute.
We got communications and bills. Town of Middlebury text amendment and map change, Middlebury land development. What do we need to do with this? Public hearing to be held.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry. We need to do number 11, the meeting dates for the calendar year. They were in the packet. They're in the packet.
Oh, yes, okay, all right, yeah, all right. So I have a motion to approve the meeting dates set forth by the.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All all
Aye.
in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries, all right. Number 12, we have communications and bills. What do we have? Congratulations to Ken and Bob Marinello who got their certificates, and I attended this thing and I didn't get mine, so I don't understand it, but congratulations. We're going to give you gold stars.
Thank you.
And the Town of Middlebury text amendment, do we need to do anything with this? This is the Kelly Road and Straits Turnpike situation. That's a huge residential rental development.
It is, and the purpose is that they're creating a, kind of similar to what the commission is considering, except it's strictly residential. They're creating an overlay zone to accommodate a fairly significant development in Middlebury. So this is for informational purposes, one, and two, if the commission wanted to make comments, if it saw any potential impact upon Watertown and wanted to note that, this would be, their public hearing, well, it's coming up tomorrow. Their public hearing would be the time to do that. So that's why
Okay.
it's on the
All
agenda.
right, thank you.
Where's Kelly Road?
Kelly Road is near the school there, at the bottom of Straits Turnpike.
Oh,
where
yeah,
it
yeah,
meets
yeah.
63,
Yes,
meets 64.
I'm with you.
Okay. All right, so do I entertain a motion to, next meeting is December 6, 2023. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody.